buddy. How's it going? You ready to move to Idaho? You ready for the big trip? 12 hours in the car? You're gonna do terrible, aren't you? All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. Today is the day that we're finally going to be installing the 1FZ into the Land Cruiser. What you'll remember in the last video is I stopped just short of installing this upper intake manifold because I was waiting for some emissions equipment and also a clamp for the wiring harness. Now, I was going to just install one of these P-clamps, but the more I looked at it, well, first of all, it didn't fit around the harness, and secondly, it just looked cheap. So let me toss this over here. I got a piece of aluminum flat bar and I made my own P-clamp, which is a lot heavier duty and fits really well in there, as you can see. Well, maybe you can. And then I added a zip tie for good measure, so that's done. Clearly at this point, the motor is now complete. Everything's bolted on and it's ready to drop in. There's just a couple of things left that I have to do, very minor things. So on the pesky heater hose pipe, I noticed that this bolt is missing. Just gotta find one of those bolts, toss it in, a couple seconds to fix that. And then I need to wrap up this harness down here and just get this loom attached to this sleeving. And what I wanna do also, if I have the terminals, is I wanna crimp new terminals on this AC cutoff harness right here. Now you'll notice I am missing that connector still. I'm trying to find it. I have something on order. It might be the right connector. If it isn't, I'll find a way to make this work. And then just plug all these connectors in and the harness will be done. As far as transmission work goes, what you're seeing here is an output shaft retaining plate that sits on the transfer case adapter, and it has a new seal in it, and I have this new O-ring as well, but there's a snap ring under there that's kind of messed up. It's my fault, that I need to replace, and I'm still waiting on that for Toyota. So I think we're gonna be installing the transmission without the transfer case, and then installing the transfer case after the fact, because I don't wanna wait for those parts to show up. They're not gonna be here probably until next week. So there's also an O-ring behind this rear output housing that I noticed after I looked at the footage of the transfer case I did not replace, and that is actually for the oil feed. So I want to get that replaced too, and that is in the same order as the snap ring, so it's not here. That snap ring that I was talking about is on the back of the transmission, and it sits right here, as you can see. And the problem with it is it just doesn't snap well. It doesn't really retain its clamping force. Only one side of it gets in the groove, the other side sits out of it because it's kind of stretched. So that's what I want to get replaced. This is where that output plate goes, and this is also where the transfer case bolts up. So we'll just be installing the transmission as it is like this and putting that transfer case on later. I should also mention that I replaced all the solenoids in the transmission, and let me show you something else that we're going to be doing. We're going to be taking out this front retainer for the pump. You can't really see in there, and then there's a big O-ring that sits behind that plate and a seal right here that's going to get replaced too before we put this on the motor and drop everything in. And it just started raining. It's been raining pretty crazy over here, which is about the worst weather California gets. You can see my whole backyard is all flooded and everything, so hopefully we can get the motor in when it stops raining, because I don't want to do that in the rain. So I have this part of the harness taken apart because I remember when I was doing this, I wasn't satisfied with the way that I did it. And I'm seeing this now and I'm still not satisfied with the way that I did it. So the wires were kind of dry rotted on the shielding and it was causing it to crack here at the end. You can see that it got hot and it's kind of black right there. And what I did was I just soldered the ends back together so that it would, you know, be a decent wire connection. But the thing with soldering things like this that are constantly bending is that the solder wicks further into the wire than you can see. And if you bend it in a certain way, it can actually snap off. So the best way to do this kind of work is with a proper crimp. And what I would like to do is just cut this wire, run new wire with the new terminal, but the terminals that I have are the wrong ones. So you can see these ones look like that, and the terminals on there look like this. So unfortunately, I don't have the right terminals to fix this correctly. So what I'm gonna do in the meantime, and I hate to do this, but what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna put heat shrink over these to just kind of keep them in place and just leave it on there for now. And I'll have to take care of this in the future. If you're restoring your Land Cruiser's wiring harness, make sure that you check these connectors along with your fuel injector connectors. Every single one of them fell apart in my hands and I had to splice in new wire, and I also installed new connector housings that you can see here. So it turns out you don't have to remove all these bolts that hold the oil pump down. I started trying to pull this thing off, which would have been a catastrophe. As I've said in previous videos, I'm a manual transmission guy, so the automatic stuff, it's kind of new to me, but I pulled off the bell housing and I was able to get to these O-rings here. Now, I only bought this O-ring right here. I didn't know there was a second one there. It's not in the diagram, so I didn't see it. This one appears to just seal the bell housing to the case here, and actually both of them are in good shape. This is just kind of preventative maintenance. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the existing O-ring, install the new one, and just toss it back together.
Is that what it is? ASMR? No, I'm serious. What's the stuff when they listen to noises?
ASMR.
They listen to noises. This is like blue collar ASMR.
Yeah. True. All right, the motor and the transmission are finished and ready to be mated together. Now I just have to head over to the shed of Land Cruiser parts and find my motor mounts and flex plate, which I don't see them in here. They're somewhere in here, and then once I get those mounts and flex plate installed on the engine, we can drop the trans and motor back into the Land Cruiser. All right, the flex plate is in here. All right. Got that. Now I need to find the motor mounts. There they are. With everything ready to go, it's time to mate the transmission to the engine and drop this thing into the cruiser. Luckily, I had some friends here to help out because I wouldn't have felt comfortable moving this thing around the corner by myself. We had some slight issues aligning the engine and the transmission, but it was just because they weren't level in terms of the engine hoist and the transmission jack, but once those were aligned, they made it together perfectly with no issues.
There's split. So we need to adjust the motor to lift the back end up. Looking?
Good, so far. Yeah, well, we can scoot it back, but once it clears this oil pan, we can drop it more.
Well, we're gonna start dipping the tranny down.
Yeah.
Oh, in an angle, huh?
I think we should, honestly. This was a pretty cold night, and there was actually a layer of frost forming on the engine hoist and the jack. You just can't see it in the video, but it took us a while to stab this thing in. There was a lot of adjusting, leveling, and just making sure that nothing gets broken during the install. Luckily, we had some very good lighting. This flashlight that we're using is a Prometheus MX3, which was sent to me, and honestly, I never knew I needed a flashlight before. I've been using an iPhone flashlight for as long as I can remember. This isn't an ad and this is not sponsored, but man, I've been using the crap out of this thing. It's seriously great. Thank you guys for sending this out.
Cool. Cool. Oh, shit. Lift it. Really? Yeah. Trans is on the motor mount. Cool.
It is now day 2 of the engine install. We were out here till about midnight last night trying to get that motor in, but we did end up getting it in, as you can see here. It did take about 4 hours to get that motor in there. It was just really awkward. The motor's really heavy. It's like 650, 700-ish pounds, and the transmission feels to be about 400 to 500 as well. And even with the 2-ton engine crane, with a load leveler, it was just really awkward and felt off balance dropping it in. And that's without the transfer case. So now what I need to do is I need to just go through the whole engine and start bolting things up, installing parts, getting everything back together. I don't really know where to start, so I'm just gonna dive into it. Since I'm still waiting for my transfer case parts, I can't start the motor yet, so the plan of attack is to start just tying everything up in the engine bay so that when I do have the parts to put that transfer case back onto the motor, I can just start it up and be ready to go. So I'm going to start on this driver side and redo this harness. That's clearly why. And install the battery box, get the battery installed, get that harness reinstalled, change out this fusible link, got a new one, get everything bolted up on this driver side of the engine bay. There's lots of stuff down there, you just can't see it. And then move over to the exhaust side and finish everything over here. And then we should be good to go, minus the transfer case. I don't know if you guys are like me, but I can't leave things alone. For example, this harness. I can't just leave it with a crusty wire loom. I'll actually lose sleep over this. That's no lie. I have no doubt that eventually I will have touched every single nut and bolt in this truck. And even then, I'll find things to repair, replace, or modify. I do admit that I like working on vehicles, so I kind of make the work for myself to do, but I also feel kind of crazy for getting stuck on such trivial tasks. But honestly, being thorough, it seems to work, so I'm not going to change the way that I'm doing things. Well, I think we've reached a stopping point. I really wanted to get the Land Cruiser running in this video, but unfortunately that's just not gonna happen. The parts that I need in order to install the transfer case to the transmission still have not shown up, and I'm really fighting the clock in terms of this whole move. So just a little peek into my life and what's happening in the next 48 hours. I have to drive this Camaro that's in front of me off camera 800 miles from Central California to Southern Idaho. I haven't even prepped it for the trip. I have to get it ready. It's gonna be fine, it's a new car, but I still have to look over everything and then take it on that trip. We're going to be taking a little trailer and a car's full of stuff over there. This is like the first offloading of stuff to the new house. And I have to set up this house, get it all clean, stage it for selling it, all that stuff while I'm doing the cruiser. So as you can see, it's quite the time crunch. There's a lot of stress involved, and I hate to leave you guys on a cliffhanger. Trust me when I say nobody wants to hear this thing run more than me. I really wanted to get this running in this video. It's not gonna happen. And I wanted to get a video out for you guys too. And if I waited to get this thing running, it would be another 6, 7, 8, 9 days before that video came out. So in the next one, hopefully we'll be able to get this thing running. I really appreciate your viewership and watching this whole series. You know, all the subscribers that I've got from this series, really appreciate all of you. Hope you like this video too, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Later.